What's happening, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. Let's jump right in. I'm going to get to my grades for the defensive side of the ball in just a moment. Before I get there, a couple news and notes from Monday. If you want a little bit of a teaser, I had 3 players this week who graded in the negative. So something for you to kind of noodle around with and kind of think and hypothesize who are going to be the 3 players who graded in the negative. I will get there towards the end of the episode. But first, let's start off with some news and notes. First of all, it was reported by Ian Rappaport that Aaron Rodgers is not going to have surgery on his pinky toe. Matt LaFleur didn't 1,000,000% confirm that, but I'm sure that Rappaport's reporting on this is likely true. So doesn't necessarily mean a ton for Packer fans at this point. We've seen Rodgers play 2 games with the toe injury, and I guess 3 technically, but 2 recently, and he's looked just fine. He's able to outrun Jalen Ramsey to the pilot, to the end zone. Just absolutely incredible performance from Rodgers these past couple weeks. And if that's how he can play on the toe, then I'm not sure, outside of Rodgers' pain threshold, which I'm sure has to be pretty high, to play and to play at that in that capacity with a broken pinky toe. But as Packer fans, it certainly hasn't seemed to be that big of an issue for him. So hopefully with, a couple weeks off, that this will be able to something that at least gets a little bit better with time. But it was reported by Rappaport that he will not have surgery at this time. So something, at least, a little bit of news, something to keep an eye on moving forward with that toe. We did also not get a update on Randall Cobb from Matt LaFleur. Sounds like they're still kind of going through options. It is a groin injury, but we don't have any other definitive information at this time. Green Bay certainly isn't devoid of wide receivers, but Randall Cobb has certainly, found a huge niche within this offense as a slot wide receiver, as was expected. And he has been everything you would have wanted him to be coming back to Green Bay from Houston. He's definitely found a role within this team. Rodgers and him still have a great connection. So, you're just hoping that it's nothing long term. If you miss Cobb for a couple weeks, you can certainly fill in just fine with EQ and Lazard and MVS and Adams and the rest of that wide receiver core without major issue. But you would love to have him come playoff time. So again, will be worth keeping an eye on, but no definitive update from Matt LaFleur on Monday. Only other real piece of news, at least in regards to Packers or former Packers, Mike McCarthy tested positive for COVID. Obviously, first and foremost, hope he is doing okay. There's a reason there's a street named after him in Green Bay, Super Bowl winning coach. But there's a couple of storylines here, right? As a, former Packer coach, and just in general, of course, you're hoping him the best in a quick, speedy recovery. 2, this certainly affects the Cowboys for this Thursday. They don't have their head coach. They're playing against the Saints. And again, McCarthy won't be there. And again, I think everyone from a Packers standpoint is hoping that they're going to fight for the number 1 seed, or at least, number 2. But as I've mentioned before, even though Green Bay just beat the Rams and the Rams did not look good at all and haven't looked good these past 3 weeks, I still think you sort of want to avoid the number 4 seed if at all possible, which would mean having to face the top wildcard team, which is likely going to be the Rams. I still think that team has the most potential of any of the wildcard teams if that ends up being the case. And, if Dallas, loses a couple games, they should sort of solidify themselves, or at least the NFC East winner, as the number 4 seed, and Green Bay would be able to avoid that entirely. So it's definitely a small Packers story as well. But again, I think you want to cheer certainly against Tampa Bay, Arizona, and Dallas at this point, because it certainly will affect Green Bay's seeding. With the Packers win and a Vikings loss, that really put Green Bay on the fast track, of course, to the NFC North Championship. Now it's not 100% set in stone, but it's very, very likely at this point. And again, if they don't win the North, something has gone completely wrong following the bye weekend in the final, 5 games of the season. So again, seeding is important. It's not everything, and you never know what teams you want to face or think you're going to be good. I always go back to that NFC Championship game against the Giants in the freezing cold that they lost to the Giants. If you remember that season, everyone did not want to play the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys beat them mid-season. Nobody wanted to go to Dallas. That had sort of been a nightmare stadium for the Packers in the past. And, Dallas was the number one seed going into that NFC. And, again, everyone was just saying, as long as they don't have to go to Dallas, they're going to be fine. If the Giants win that game, you're going to get home field Packers in Lambeau Field. They don't lose there. To this day, I think had Dallas beaten the Giants in that game, I think Green Bay goes to the Super Bowl. I think Green Bay would have gone down to Dallas and won that football game. I think Green Bay was the better team, and I think Green Bay was actually much more built for the Dome in an indoor stadium in that season based on what players they had, much more than I think even Dallas was. So, be careful what you wish for sometimes. The Giants came into Green Bay, won that game, completely shocked them. So, whether you're the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, or the 7, you have to go out and play the games that you're scheduled for. And I still think, of course, and especially now the number 1 seed has a massive advantage having one less game, but all you can do is play the schedule that's played. Of course, Green Bay's going for that 1, but I still think if you can avoid that number 4 seed and having to face likely the best wild card, or not likely, but literally the best wild card team, whoever that ends up being, I still think that would be a huge win. So if Dallas would lose on Thursday, that would certainly go a decent ways in solidifying the fact that Green Bay at least would likely avoid that number 4 slot going into the playoffs. All right, let's get into defensive grades. Number 1, I don't think is going to be a surprise, was Rasul Douglas. And so let's start with some of the great things he did, right? So I think he had 4 pass breakups on the day. He had the beautiful play against the screen pass early in the game where he made a tackle, avoided a couple blockers, and made the play on the screen. Obviously had the pick 6. Had the opportunity to intercept another pass later, couldn't come up with it. I did grade that as a slight negative because, I graded it as a negative because, yes, he was there, but it's not like he had amazing coverage on the play. It was an awful throw. It came right to him and he dropped it. So it ended up being a negative grade in that play. But of course, the big one that everyone wanted to sort of talk about from a negative standpoint was the OBJ touchdown. And of course, he has the pick 6. It's funny because I posted on Twitter, this doesn't have anything to do with the pick 6, but Rasul Douglas needs to be on the field and needs to be, the corner ahead of Kevin King when King comes back. I don't think I was I don't think that's a Super Bowl take by any means, but I posted that. And actually was going to post it earlier in the game before the pick 6 even happened. And then something, I forget what it was, but something happened in the game. I didn't get to post it. And then he has the pick 6 and I finally posted that. And then, of course, he drops the interception, gives up the touchdown. Of course, everyone in my mentions is going, oh, what about now? You see, you said something and now, of course, everyone then wants to dump on Rasul Douglas. No, it didn't change anything. Yeah, he gave up a touchdown pass on the play, but we've certainly seen Stokes and King and even Jair from time to time give up big plays. It's not the be all end all. You're a corner in the league. You're going to give up some big plays. Would I have liked him to play that better? Yes, but he had a fantastic game through and through, a phenomenal football game. Would have loved to have him get the interception. Would have loved to have had him not give up the touchdown to OBJ. Even outside of that, the pick 6, the pass breakups, the sticky coverage, the tackling, all of it was just a really phenomenal game. And I want to really quickly go over that touchdown to OBJ because it's a really interesting play. In fact, I wanted to get another set of eyes on it. So I actually went to Ben Fennell and chatted with him a little bit about it because it's easy to see it's cover 4, right? There's no question about that. You have Darnell Savage that's breaking down from safety. So usually cover 4 is going to be outside corner, and then your 2 safeties, each responsible for 1/4 of the field. In this case, Darnell Savage is playing a robber and coming down and playing one of the shallow zones. Well, Chandon Sullivan backs up and plays that 1/4 of the field. So you've got Stokes and Sullivan, and then Amos and Douglas as your 4 quarters coverage. And as Ben so perfectly pointed out, after a few seconds of quarters coverage, what happens is it basically, it turns into man coverage. So you're playing your zone, and then once everything kind of breaks the way you're expecting, or it does, then you get into man concepts and you cover your man. So on this play, there's so much going on. I'm going to try to get to it as succinctly and not nerdy as possible. But first of all, the first thing to point out, there's 2 key things to point out. One is the formation. So the Rams are in an empty set. Now, Green Bay's bringing only 4 guys. So the first thing you're thinking as a corner, empty set, the ball, and especially with Stafford, the ball is usually coming out of his hands quickly. So you're not expecting a double move here from OBJ. You are expecting something out of his hands because when you're only, 5 offensive linemen, nobody to chip from a tight end, the offense doesn't know what the defense is going to do. So they could be bringing in an extra guy. You don't know. So you're expecting a quick pass. And there was actually good pressure on the play as well, which makes you even believe more that this is going to be a quick pass and not something that has the ability to develop as some sort of double move. So that's the first thing. The second thing is as that slant develops, Douglas actually is doing what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to cover the slant on the play and kind of go in on it. And he doesn't do it super aggressively. It's one thing if you crash in on it and then are susceptible to the double move. He takes a fairly cautious, I'm going to go at the slant, but I'm going to leave myself a little bit of space. And then, of course, you get the double move and OBJ separates from him. The other thing that you have to keep an eye on here, or at least be aware of, is the score. And Green Bay at that point had a 3-score lead. And the one thing you don't want to do is give up explosives, right? So I would have loved in this situation for Douglas to be just a bit more on the cautious side and say, you know what? I don't care if he completes a 5 or 6 yard, play on a slant. I'm going to play the back fourth of the field and make sure that nothing gets behind me. I could say the same for Amos too, but Amos didn't have anyone in his zone, and him crashing the slant makes a little bit more sense in my opinion. Douglas probably should have been the one that's a little bit more safe. But at the end of the day, this isn't that egregious of a play. This is Douglas kind of going in on a slant, expecting Stafford to get the ball out of his hands quickly. It's an empty formation with a 4-man rush, and it just happens to be that's the play that they call the double move. And Douglas slightly bites on it and just doesn't have the speed to catch up to OBJ. Would I've liked him to be a bit more cautious there? I would. Is it a massively egregious play? It's not. It's just sometimes good offense beats good defense. And Green Bay was set up to stop sort of the intermediate stuff on that play. Douglas went in on the slant as he's usually supposed to do in that situation. And it just ended up burning Green Bay. Stafford made a phenomenal play. OBJ, separated with ease, and it ended up being a touchdown. Do I think, again, Green Bay and Douglas could have played that different? I do, but not a massively downgraded play overall. But I do give kudos to Eric Stokes on the other side, who also saw a double move and stayed back on it and didn't go for the slant and sort of stayed back, again, understanding the score and everything like that. So long story short, Douglas had an amazing game, did give up a touchdown there, and did have the dropped interception. But outside of that, just a phenomenal game and certainly deserving of the top grade this week. Rashawn Gary was number 2, the forced fumble, a huge piece of that. But even late in the game, he's still hustling, even though he was on a bit of a pitch count, it looked like. I couldn't be more impressed with where Rashawn Gary's at right now to have pressure the way that he did against an Andrew Whitworth, who's one of the best tackles in football. Just a fantastic game from Gary, and especially because he's not 100% and working back from that arm injury on a bit of a pitch count and still to have the impact that he had. He's just really coming into his own. It was a really great game from Gary. And then number 3 was Chris Barnes. I think the couple highlights, right? The screen pass early in the game where he dips under and makes a play on the screen. He has a play where he's covering Cooper Kupp one-on-one. He was active as a tackler. He did have a missed tackle late in the game on Kupp, but overall, really, really nice game from Chris Barnes. Honorable mention in this game to Kenny Clark, Eric Stokes, and Adrian Amos, all who I had positive grades on. Thought all 3 played very well in this game as well. Interestingly enough, PFF and I have been mostly on the same page this season, but they actually had negative grades on both Amos and Clark in this game. I don't know how you can watch this game and have a negative grade on Kenny Clark. Same thing with Amos, but neither here nor there. I liked all 3 of those in this game. But again, number 1, Douglas, number 2, Gary, number 3, Chris Barnes. On the flip side, 3 players graded in the negative. That's it. No other players graded in the negative for Green Bay, just 3. Number 1, of course, Shannon Sullivan. That's probably the low-hanging fruit, the easy one. Giving up the touchdown. Yeah, the feet get tangled at the wrong time. I don't, put a ton of blame on that. It's one of those things that happens, unfortunately. Do I wish Sullivan would have covered it a bit better? I do. But certainly still giving up a touchdown on that play is far less than ideal. And then had a couple other plays where I thought he just could have covered better. There was a slant to Cooper Kupp and just, didn't come close to defending that. A couple other plays like that where I just thought he could have done a bit better. Not a terrible, terrible game, but certainly was the lowest graded player in this one for me. Number 2 was Teepinelli. I think 3 or 4 occasions that he got blocked one-on-one by a tight end, and it's never something you want to see as an edge rusher. He's just a bit undersized, and I love his effort. I love his hustle. I love his spin move. He's going to make a play here or there through the course of the game, but just needs to get a bit more functional strength, and he just doesn't have it right now. You can see that, and he just got beat up at times by tight ends, a couple of times by offensive linemen, but not a terrible game, but you can just see that he's not fully there yet, nor would you expect him to be as a second year undrafted guy making, playing really some of his first snaps. But he was my second lowest graded player. And the number 3 in very limited snaps was TJ Slayton. Very small negative grade, nothing egregious at all, but a slight negative in, again, just a handful of snaps for TJ Slayton. Those are the only 3 that graded in the negative this week for me. Other shout out that I wanted to give in this one, Ladarius Hamilton, plus 0.3 in limited snaps. I thought he put a couple really nice plays on tape. It was really intriguing to see what he did. And he's graded out pretty decent, pretty like right around neutral in his snaps so far as a guy, again, that they got off the Buccaneers practice squad. Interesting find. I'm intrigued by what I saw on tape this week from Ladarius Hamilton. That's going to do it for me today. Again, to recap, Douglas, Gary, and Barnes, my top 3, Sullivan, Teepa, and TJ, my bottom 3. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. I believe I will be with Rachel Hotmeyer, so look forward to that. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.